Now, in terms of finding our way back to God, I know that for some of you, that may be part of your story, that you maybe started out, going to church as a child, but maybe kind of wandered away from that. Maybe you've come back to that. Maybe you were never actually involved in church at all, but you are now. You're here this morning. Maybe you're not even sure about your relationship with God and where it is. And so we're all on a journey, because I know even in my own life there have been different times when I've felt like I've been more on track with God, sometimes less so. And I even remember, my last semester of my master's degree sort of feeling somewhat disconnected, if you will. Having the knowledge, but not having the heart, if you will, in terms of my relationship with the Lord. And so we go through different points, and I've certainly discovered that as well since that time. And, in being here as well, that there are times when we feel that we're closer to God, times when we feel that maybe we're not so close to God. Sometimes it's, for me, it's my own choices, because I get to rely on my own skills or abilities, or just, in a sense, put things into an autopilot and just go along. Sometimes it's a willful disobedience where we just decide that we're going to go in an opposite direction to what God has set for us. And in the midst of all of that, there's always this understanding that God is looking for us to find our fulfillment for all of our longings in Him. And that's difficult for us, because we're flawed human beings who aren't always getting it right. And some of the people that you saw in that video, we're going to be listening to them over the next several weeks, and some of them will identify with your story, I'm sure. Some of them won't. Your story may be much less dramatic. It might be way more dramatic. But nonetheless, there'll be different stories that might trigger some things in you about where you are on that journey towards the Lord. And so let's listen to 3 stories right now from Bryce, Melissa, and Jake as they talk about finding their way back to God.
My father was an alcoholic, so I grew up in that type of a home. Once I became of age, drinking was just natural. I saw it, I did it, participated in it, got heavy into it. My first marriage was not very successful, and it ended fairly soon. I had a daughter with my first wife, and I was very into being a daddy. Having my daughter gone was very, very difficult. And it was probably at that time, as far as from a drinking standpoint, it got a lot heavier. Got married again, got into the same habits, same routine. My first marriage lasted 5 years. I had a daughter, got divorced. My second marriage lasted 5 years. I had a daughter, got divorced. Didn't really learn from my experiences. It was more a day-to-day, I want to feel good today, however that was. Alcohol, sex, success at work. There was no real foundation of anything significant that I was searching for. That was rock bottom for me. I've had 2 failed marriages in 10 years, 2 daughters that are no longer with me on a day-to-day basis, and I'm by myself at this point.
My journey started when I was 2 years old, and my mom and my dad divorced, and we had lived with my grandmother for a long time, and she had then at the time gave us an ultimatum to stay with her or to leave. And my grandmother and I did not have a good relationship. My mother and my grandmother did not have a good relationship. I met my ex-husband when I was a junior. It was great in the beginning. I didn't really know who I was, though, at 16, 17 years old, to be in love or even know what it meant. It just, something was missing. But I just was so in the moment and wanted to get married and the whole fairy tale that I kind of pushed those feelings aside. Once we had my daughter, it definitely took a turn for the worse. His behavior changed and my behavior changed, and I wanted out about a year after. And so I stuck with it for a little bit longer and went to therapy. And then once I found out I was pregnant with my son, I felt like I was just stuck. I have 2 kids, and I definitely don't want to be a single mom with 2 kids. So I knew something had to change, and I just kind of went the wrong way to make that change. I had an affair, and then on Father's Day weekend, I had another affair. And the man that I had an affair with ended up being my boyfriend for a few years after me and my ex-husband separated. I think from the beginning of being with a grandmother that treated me like a piece of crap, to now being in a relationship that I'm just destroyed and slept with multiple men, but there was no God. And if he was there, he was not a nice person.
I grew up in a Christian home with two parents who also grew up in Christian families. When I was young, about 7, my parents moved to a camp in Central Illinois, a Christian youth camp. And that was a really, really cool way to grow up, just surrounded by youth groups and Christian kids. And coupled with that, I also grew up in the church, surrounded by a family that didn't just believe it, but they lived it. For me, growing up, the key word, I think, in my family would be acceptance. I didn't find that out till later, that was a key word, but it was exactly what I knew growing up. No matter what I did, I would always be loved. Exactly as I am in any moment. I had a faith, I saw how it played out in my family's lives, but I did not have a direction, and I did not have a purpose that I felt like I was being pulled towards or called to, just kind of searching, longing for a fulfillment that it seemed like everybody else in my family had, and I just hadn't found yet.
Now, maybe your story doesn't connect exactly with theirs, but possibly like Bryce, you have some longings that have been unfulfilled. Or maybe like Carissa, you find yourself in a place that you never really intended to be. Or maybe like Jake, even you're left thinking that there has to be something more. I just don't quite have it all together yet. And so we're going to be talking this morning about awakening to longings, the longings that are inside of us. And if you remember, a couple of years ago, we watched a documentary called Crave, an interview with a variety of people in Vancouver, just people from a barista at a coffee shop to millionaires, and just kind of a variety of people in between, and what was going on in their lives, and what are the things that they were looking for, and how it all really came down to 3 different areas that we want to talk about, but how it comes out in the stories that we write, in the art that we create, in the songs that we sing, all of these longings that we have that are part of our soul. And this morning we were singing some of those songs. So I want to do a little audience participation here. How many of you like to sing? Most of you, because I know you sound really good when I'm sitting up here. I can hear you singing. So I'm going to sing. These are some popular songs. Although maybe if you're from a younger generation, you might not know these songs, but that's okay. The rest of you, I'm sure, will get it, all right? So I'm going to start, and I'm going to sing part of these are all songs about longing, all right, about longing for something. I'm going to sing the first little part of the song, the phrase, and you're going to chime in with the rest of it, okay? You got that? You got that? You ready? You got your singing voice on? Okay, all right. First of all, the Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want. Well done. Okay, you got this, all right? Some of you may not have known that, but that's okay. All right, U2's next. But I still haven't found. Oh, you guys are good. You're really good. Okay, here's the last one. This is the one's a little bit more embarrassing, all right? I'm looking for love. How can you know that one? All right. Songs about longing. There's a million more that you come up with, right? But that's what those songs are all about. Whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever it is. But we want to take a look at some of those longings because we want to get a handle of where we are, so that we can be communicating, asking God to lead us in the right directions and not the wrong places. So the first one is actually longing for love. And this came out in the Crave documentary as well, if you remember watching that. If you didn't get to see that, you can borrow it. You can sign it out and take a look at it, but really good for us. But we're all longing for love of some kind or another. In the Guinness Book of Records, I don't know if you look at any of that kind of stuff or not, but Glenn Wolfe holds the record for the most marriages. Some of them just days long. Some of them years long, but he has 29 different marriages, or had them before he died. He was a Baptist minister, apparently. I'm not sure exactly what I'm not sure exactly what he was trying to do or trying to prove, but that's how many marriages he went through. The woman with the most marriages, I think, actually is from the UK and had 23 or something like that anyway. But I'm not sure why, he didn't stop after the first few, but anyway, he kept trying. I'm not sure exactly what he was looking for, but I don't know. He got his name in the Guinness Book of Records. Maybe that's what he was looking for. I'm not sure. But most of us, when we have difficulty in relationships, we somehow keep trying and hoping that the next one is going to be the right one, and we risk those relationships again. Why? Because we all have that longing to be loved. We all want to find that place where we belong, where we're accepted for who we are, for somebody who's going to watch out for us, and enter into a relationship with us. And every time we come into a relationship, of course, doesn't matter whether it's a relationship like here this morning, for example, or some of the small groups that people are involved in, or whether it's a much more intimate or deeper relationship, there's always the stuff that we bring with us in terms of our expectations to being loved. And then there's always the expectations of the other person that they're bringing with them as well. And so we all have that longing to be loved, but sometimes we find it very, very difficult to really find that satisfying place in those relationships to find that. And sometimes, like the song, we are looking for love in all the wrong places and all the wrong faces, and we're not exactly sure how to find that. Well, the second thing is that we long for purpose. Now, think for a moment about what you wanted to be when you grew up. All right, think for a moment about that. When you're 6, 7, 8, whatever, when you're just a kid. I don't know what you long to be. I long to be a professional hockey player, and I thought that was a possibility. What did you want to be when you grew up? Anybody? Anyone? A mom. You did that very well. Well, there you go. What else? Anybody else have any idea? Here? An exotic cat breeder. Like, were you going to be the exotic one, or the cats were the exotic ones? I'm not sure which. The exotic cat breeder. Well, you got part of that right. Anyway, I'm not sure about the cat. Yeah. Was somebody? I saw a hand over here. Somebody. Yeah. Baseball pitcher. Yeah. Yeah. The Blue Jays could use you right now. Yeah. 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 And we thought those were possibilities. Yeah. Aha! Did she take that in the right? It's funny how we think about those things, because at that age, of course, we don't need a job. We can hardly even write our own name, and we don't have a lot of bills to pay. But when we are we're still thinking about something that we want to do when we grow up, because there's that deep desire inside of us to have some purpose, to do something that we're going to accomplish something in this world. And we see that happening around us, and we see that sort of what's considered to be successful and the images of success. And that's something that we get, it's part of our contribution, if you will, that we're going to make to society, and we tend to own that even as we're little kids. And so we do have that desire as well, that desire that we're going to accomplish something in this world, that there's going to be something that is going to outlive us, if you will, as we live our lives. The third thing is longing for meaning. These are kind of the why questions. Why, God, have I been put into this world? Why am I in this place? You might think, why are these good things happening to me? Why are these bad things happening to me? God, what are you up to? How do I know what it is that you want for me? What's the point to my life? Why am I here? Why am I in so much pain? Why did I have that opportunity? Why are you bringing these things across my life right now? And we've certainly done some different studies about that, about why God has placed us on this earth in order to be in relationship with Him, and all of those different factors that go in it. But you and I are often asking those why kinds of questions, and many times there are not easy answers to those. And sometimes there are good answers, but not always. But those are the ones that kind of touch deep into our soul, because every one of us, we've had enough either good things or bad things, enough pain in our lives that have forced us to ask some of those questions. Why is this happening? And we hope that God has an answer for us. So we have to understand that inside of us, we are created with those longings for love, for purpose, for meaning, that God has given those things into our lives. And the problem isn't that we have those longings or those desires. The problem is, how do we channel those longings in the right directions so that they get fulfilled in the right ways? How do we satisfy those inner cravings without doing it in ways that are going to be harmful, are going to be damaging? How are we going to look for these things in all the right places? Well, the good news is that you can find those things at home. Now, maybe not in your home, but in God the Father's home. And that's what the story is about this morning as we listen to Luke chapter 15, the lost son who is thinking in his own mind, there has to be more. And so he goes to his dad and asks for more, and then takes that and heads off into a distant country. Everything that he was looking for were all legitimate things. He was looking for the same things that you and I are looking for. He was looking for that love. He was looking for that purpose. He was looking for that meaning. Yet, he felt like they were not available to him in the way that he wanted in the situation where he was. And so he goes to his dad and he asks for his share of living, not life in terms of what Jesus is offering, but in terms of the material living that he's entitled to. And of course, this would be considered to be a tremendous insult, because it's like going to, your dad in this case and saying, hey, I know I'm in the will, and I know that after you die, I'm going to get these things from you, but here's the thing, Dad, I wish you were dead right now because I want the stuff right now. And I'm thinking, is that okay? If you just, let's just pretend that you're gone and you just give me my share. And astonishingly, the father says yes. And he actually gives him his share of the estate and allows him to take it and to do with it as he wills. Now, you might think that that's not good parenting. But in this story, anyway, as Jesus tells it, the father is allowing his son to be able to make some choices in life that he's going to have to deal with. There will be some consequences for his choices. They might be good consequences. In this case, they're mostly bad consequences as he heads off into this distant country. Because it says the younger son squandered his wealth in wild living. We're left to our imagination of what wild living might include. Whether it includes women and partying and other, circumstances where he gets involved, where people maybe have taken advantage of him. He might have gambled some of his money away. We're not quite sure all of what would encompass the wild living. But the result of that is he winds up with absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So that he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. And he longed even to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating because he was so hungry, but no one gave him anything. So he's working for less than room and board. And things have gotten desperate for him. So not only has he squandered all of his wealth, but he's taken some experiences that have led him in a really destructive pattern. He's picked up some bad habits, made some bad choices, maybe asking some questions. Why am I here? Why did this turn out so badly for me? Why am I so lonely? Why am I so broke? Why is my life so empty? Why did I end up in a place like this? Your life maybe actually have some similarities for it. And you may be in a place where you have asked God some of those same questions. Or you may be in a place that's far less painful and you're just thankful that you didn't make some of those bad choices and didn't go down some of that road. But the reason that Jesus told this story is so that when you and I reach a point in our lives where we realize that we've made some bad decisions, that we're in a place where we really didn't want to be, where we recognize that there's got to be something more to my life than what I'm experiencing right now, that Jesus says, there's a way that you can come home and you can get back into that place where those longings can be fulfilled in legitimate ways. Or that longing for love, or that longing for purpose, that longing for meaning. And so, here's the questions. Where will you go to satisfy these God-given longings? What are you doing in your life that is taking you either in the right direction towards God, or in the wrong direction away from Him? Because, just admit it, that you have these longings going on inside of you, and you're looking for fulfillment in them. And what will draw you close to God or away from Him? How are you going to make this happen? How am I going to make this happen? Just because I get to talk about Jesus all the time doesn't mean that I'm always close to Jesus. Just because I get to do things that are, God-centered, if you will, in my day-to-day life, doesn't mean that I'm always living obediently in that. So you and I both have opportunity here to actually find our way back to God, to get closer to God in our spiritual journey. Because time and time again, spiritually, we've wandered away. We've maybe taken it for granted in some ways. We've actually thought that maybe there's something better out there, that maybe God's plan for me really isn't the best one after all. And I know this is especially true, or was for me anyway, as a student, as we looked at the different things that lay before us, as we're trying to plan our whole life and thinking that somehow God's ways aren't really going to be the best ways for me. And sometimes it's been presented to that. I know when I was growing up, God was presented as someone who had a whole lot of rules and regulations and was looking for any opportunity to punish you if you ever stepped out of line. That was the kind of God that I remember hearing about. And so, who doesn't want to leave home if that's all you're facing? But time after time, we wander away when God has something so much better in store for us. Jesus talks about these things where He says, "Come to me. Anyone who's weary, heavy laden, I'll give you rest." Thinking, well, that sounds pretty good, actually. Isn't that something that we would want to have? And so we wander away sometimes from the very things we're actually looking for, and we forget about God. We try to do things on our own, and sometimes we completely turn our backs on Him and just kind of totally walk away. Now, the interesting thing is that most people in North America, most people in Canada, actually believe that God exists. They believe that there is a God. Contrary to what you might think or what we might hear, about what other things people might believe, people do tend, over 3/4, 80% believe that God exists in some form or another. But when it comes right down to how many actually feel that connection with God, or how many actually, are actively seeking after God, the numbers drop way down. But it's not because people don't want to have that connection, but it's often because people don't understand how to have that connection. And nobody's shown them, or nobody's told them, or they're not quite sure. They're still like the young man who has taken off his inheritance, and he's kind of turned his back on the father, and he's walked away into a whole other world. And as he's kind of in the midst of things going from bad to worse, as he loses his first $100, and then his first 1,000, and then his first 10,000, as he begins to squander away the inheritance, all the way along there's this nagging thought that this is not going well. There's got to be a better way. But the harder he tries, the worse it gets, till he finally reaches a point where he says, I just don't have any other option except to go home. And so what we want to do is not let it get that far, but if it does, or if we find someone else that's somewhere along that journey, is together say, you know what, there is a better option. There is a way that we can return back to God, and we can actually receive what God has in store for us, that love, that purpose, that meaning that He's providing for us, and then look for it in all the right places. And no, it's not going to be an instantaneous thing that's going to happen to us. It's going to be something that is going to take some time, that we need to be diligent about, if you will, but to understand that the longings in our life are to be fulfilled by God in a healthy way. That's why we want you to read the book. In there's a 30-day challenge that you can take up where you're going to be asked to participate on your own. I'm not going to be checking your book, but it's something that you can do in the back. There's 30 days where you can journal, where you can pray, where you can ask God about some things that are going on in your life. That's why you need to have the book, or whether it's also being involved in the small groups and so on. But I want you right now to hear from the two brothers who happen to be pastors in Chicago, and I want you to hear a little bit about what they have to say about this series that we're going to be doing.
That story of the lost son is every one of our stories. That's why Jesus told the story, to help each of us find our way home, to help us find our way back to God. And what the story does, it introduces one of life's really big questions, and that is, where will we go to satisfy these longings we have for love and for purpose and for meaning? Will those longings drive us away from God, or will they bring us back closer to God? John and I have had the opportunity to interview, really hundreds of people and see thousands more walk a similar path. And that path always included 5 spiritual awakenings on their way back to God. And in the next sessions, what we want to do is we want to introduce you to these 5 spiritual awakenings. And here's my sincere hope. It's this, that you will find your way back to God. Maybe for the first time, or like me, maybe one more time.
The 17th century mathematician Blaise Pascal had one of the greatest intellects in the history of Western civilization. He grew up knowing about God, but not earnestly following Him. Then, in a profound middle-of-the-night experience with God, he had a change of heart. That experience ignited Pascal's passion to help others find their way back to God. Pascal began to challenge his fellow intellectuals to a wager on God. He would dare them to step into a belief about God and see if it didn't change their lives. Pascal explained his wager this way: make a bet that there is a God who loves you. If you are right, you have everything to gain. And if you are wrong, you have nothing to lose. Make a bet that God is real. It's a gamble where you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. If you find God, you will find the source of unconditional love for which you have always longed. Finding God will offer you a purpose for your life. And God is the one who can take your past and make sense out of it. That's a big-time payoff.
The risk I want you to take is this: pray to God. If that's not a common practice for you, it may seem awkward at first, but I want you to try it.
I would pray, but I didn't know who I was praying to. I wouldn't sit there like I do now and know who I'm talking to. I just someone's there, so hear me.
I knew what I was doing was wrong, but still I broke away from it, because to get back into a relationship with God meant I had to admit to a lot of things. I had to ask for a lot of forgiveness and a lot of internal conviction that was going to take place. I didn't want to do any of that.
For others, prayer is a regular part of your life. Maybe so regular that at times it becomes a little routine. Either way, I want you to open yourself up to finding God in a deeper and more life-changing way than ever before.
As I was laying there, I just kept remembering this prayer from a book about a Celtic monk that I loved growing up. My dad introduced me to the author. The prayer that he goes to anytime he doesn't know what to do is, Lord, have mercy. And it's just, he repeats it. It just becomes this meditation. Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy. Knowing the whole time and kind of laughing at myself that, I really don't deserve this, but asking anyway and receiving it.
So here's exactly what I'm asking you to do. Pray as if God is real every single day for the next 30 days. And here's the first of 5 prayers I want to ask you to pray. God, if you are real, make yourself real to me. Awaken in me the ability to see that you are what's missing from my life.
You to do as well is to pray that prayer. Maybe you're convinced that God is real, but you're not exactly sure about God's involvement in your own life. Maybe you're not quite sure about your relationship with God, and actually, you know what, you might even be a little bit nervous that if you pray this prayer and God actually does reveal himself to you in a greater way, that that's going to cause some change in your life. Yeah, probably will. But I'm thinking that that's worth it. That from what I've seen in my own life and seen in other people's lives, that when God makes himself real to us, that there are some profound changes, but it's the changes that are necessary and it's the changes that are good and that are healthy for us. When Jesus says that he comes to give us life to the fullest, abundant life, again, to me, that sounds like a good thing. That sounds like the type of life that I really want to have. And so this prayer, I encourage you to take this. This is pretty simple. This is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. It's something that you can do from Pascal's wager. And I remember studying this in philosophy and why it wasn't a good proof for God's existence. Well, yeah, I suppose philosophically speaking, it's not. But when you and I open up ourselves to the Holy Spirit of God working in our lives, we do begin to see the effects. We do begin to see him at work. So I encourage you to take this. And again, in the back of the book, there's not only this sentence, but there's also some additions to it as we go along that will take you a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper. But to begin with this and say, okay, God, I know that I can get closer to you. Even if I feel close or if I feel far away, I know that there's a way that I can get closer to you, that I can come back home, if you will, to the arms of the Father and to realize something that you have in store for me. So take time to pray this. It's really simple, and I'm guessing that as busy as our lives are, we can take time to do this. That it's really, really simple, because many of us are going to be checking baseball scores this week, to find out what's going on, and this will take a lot less time. But I guarantee it'll have much, much bigger results. It'll matter. It'll matter to our lives. So God, if you are real, make yourself real to me. And if you already are convinced that God is real, but you just don't feel like it's a deep reality and you can manipulate the words a little bit if you want to. But something simple where you're just opening yourself up saying, okay, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to take that risk. And be prepared that God will do something in your lives. And actually look forward to that. When the son returns home, there's a real apprehension that he has. There's a real deep anxiety that he has as he, in a sense, crawls back home to beg for a place, to actually be able to work and to live at his dad's estate. But what he gets is so much better. He didn't expect a party. He didn't expect a celebration. He expected to get what he deserved, but he got better. And you and I, as we come to God in this, we need to expect that God is going to give us better. So there's a book to read. If you're willing to read it, I would encourage you to do it, because I think that'll take you much deeper into what it is that we're talking about. There's Luke chapter 15 that you can read. Of the story of the lost son, and as we looked at last week, there's the lost sheep and the lost coin as well, but focusing on that, reading that over as we go, but praying this prayer every day. God, if you are real, make yourself real to me.